Good morning for the audience. Those are watching us from Canada. Good afternoon in Paris. I can't believe this is the last panel we're gonna to launch now. It has been 2 days sessions of different panels, and then again, I will invite you to go and check on our YouTube channel. By the end of this week, you will have a chance to go and replay different sessions that we had. We're going to finish today with this panel exchange between Eric and his guest about the exchange program with French schools in Canada. For the ones who are considering maybe not to jump into the decision to move to France for good, but maybe going to a university school in Canada where they offer a program that will allow you to go to France within that cursus, that would be a good option as well. That's the topic today. We're going to have to talk to with Eric. Eric is a moderator. I quickly introduce you, Eric. Again, that's a good friend of mine. I know Eric when he was back then director of recruitment for the global MBA at ESSEC. Prior to that, Eric used to work at Sciences Po and at the Long Island University in New York, where he's from. Eric wrote a book that you might be interested purchasing is getting into MBA in France. So you have a lot of information for the people who are considering that choice. Eric is the founder of the Candidate Coach, which is a boutique admission and consulting, boutique admission consulting and a career coach agency. Without any further ado, I'd like to pass on the mic to Eric, and the floor is yours. I will see you in a bit with questions of the audience. I just remind for the people, if you want to ask any questions, just use the chat button, and then we'll make sure that we address this question to Eric. Eric.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Hello, Canada. So this is the last of the conference's the education piece of Best of France, and it's been my pleasure to hopefully share a lot of insights with you and answer a lot of questions. We've had some fantastic guests, and I have one more to introduce you to today. As Frank said, I'm the founder of Candidate Coach, which is an admissions consulting service for helping people from all over the world who are applying for master's programs, MBAs, and so forth. So if at the end of this you have any questions, you can find me, and by the way, my guest who I'm about to introduce, on LinkedIn if you want to ask any additional questions. So as Frank said, I was the director of recruitment at ESSEC Business School here in Paris. And before that, I worked at Sciences Po, which is another very prestigious institution with its history, with its origins in political science programs. So I can obviously tell you about those very much, or if you're interested in any other programs, I do have a lot of contacts around the country to help you get to know them better. So that said, our guest today is a woman named Teresa Perez, who I've known for quite a number of years. She is based in Kingston, which is near Toronto, Canada. And we met because of our roles that I used to be a recruiter at ESSEC, and Teresa and I met on the road. And we've met in how many countries around the world, Teresa?
Quite a few.
Yeah. Teresa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eric. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited to be able to talk about the partnerships that we have with schools in France. My name is Teresa Perez. As Eric mentioned, I'm the Associate Director of Recruitment and Admissions for the Smith School of Business at Queen's University, based in Kingston, Ontario. We are located, for those of you that are not familiar with Queen's, between Toronto and Montreal. So we're in the province of Ontario, and we offer some amazing master's programs as well as MBA options. So I'm happy to discuss offline, or if you have any questions after our discussion, I'm happy to answer those.
Sure. So obviously, and thank you, Teresa, obviously dual degrees and exchange programs exist in, with schools besides the business world. But obviously today, Teresa, I think she's more of an expert on the business schools. Just a little bit more about Queen's, because I'm not totally familiar with the offer. If I understand correctly, Smith Business School is the school of business within Queen's University, right?
That is correct. Absolutely.
And what are some of the other programs or schools or areas of study that Queen's specializes in?
Yeah, I would say that that we have an amazing engineering program and medicine program outside of the School of Business. So there are many different options that one can select from outside of business-specific masters or business programs within the Smith School of Business. We also have a really incredible and robust English program. And so if students are looking to come and do an English program at Queen's, that is an option as well. But I will direct the audience's attention to a really unique program called the Masters of International Business. This is a fantastic option that gives you the ability to study at Queen's for 6 months and then go abroad to another country to study for an additional 6 months. So this is a double degree option and really gives the perspective of global learning, global studying, a global network. And it is one of the very few international business programs out there. So I do think that if you are here and you really want to understand international opportunities, both in France and elsewhere, this is a really unique program you might want to consider.
Excellent, thank you. Looking at dual degrees and exchange programs in general, they obviously provide a lot of opportunities. As I understand, one of the first ones to exist in North America was with, I believe, University of Delaware, and it was right around following World War I, where there was sort of a real opening of like an interest in international affairs and connecting with countries abroad. And dual degrees and exchange programs really exploded in the 80s and 90s. And I don't know when Smith started doing that, but what's the story from your perspective with dual degrees and exchanges? Like, how did they come about, or what do you know about them, and why are they interesting not only to students but also for business schools themselves?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. It's hard to find information going way back as to why they started, but I can tell you that schools like ours that have such a strong international reputation are built on the foundation of having international partnerships. So it's to the benefit of not only the school to be internationally recognized by having these partnerships, but also for the students to have experiences outside of their home school. So once upon a time, mobility wasn't as easy as it is today. And so you would likely go to school in your hometown or where it was easy to access. And so having an international opportunity would expand not just your outreach, but also your network, your peers, gaining understanding of different cultures, communities outside of what you know. So I think that, it probably began, with that in mind, that it gives students an opportunity to gain perspective that they wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to gain. So I think that exchange programs and dual degrees rather, I think that they offer students a really unique opportunity to get to know a different culture outside of the academics, because of course learning at different institutions is going to be part of it. But I think the other piece of it is that understanding this, what I like to say is cultural awareness, you can only do by lived experiences. And so being in a different culture, relocating to a different country, different school, really broadens your perspective and offers an opportunity that you wouldn't be able to get if you stayed in your home school or the university for a number of years without sort of having that diversity aspect to your program. Of course, at a school like ours, we do see quite a lot of international students also join cohorts year over year. So there's that element as well, is that in offering exchange programs, it really is a true exchange in that students are leaving Canada to go abroad, but also we're seeing students from those countries come to Kingston to study as well. So the classrooms are becoming more and more diverse in terms of thought leadership and business perspectives from different countries, from the students that we're getting from different countries as part of the exchange as well. So it's important to note that, because this isn't just sending students outside of our country, but rather also seeing students come from a variety of different countries. So last year alone, we welcomed over 80 students, over 500 students from 80 countries in our business program. So that is massive. So when you think about those statistics, it really does, speak to the interest and the volume of students interested in doing these exchange programs.
I think it's a really interesting point. For those who don't have the opportunity to do a study abroad or an exchange program, it's not necessarily for everyone, or maybe there's some limitations you have for a variety of reasons. But to think about those that are coming in, right? You can benefit from the conversations and the experiences and the knowledge of all of those people coming in. And that's kind of like, I suppose, a regret that I have, like when I was an undergrad, that I didn't take advantage of that as much. I think a lot of people, without thinking about it, tend to gravitate towards people who are like them. And you tend to make friends who are most similar to you. And it's kind of a missed opportunity to not take the effort to get to know people coming from different countries. And maybe it's because it's a little bit awkward at first. Like, you don't know how to communicate. You don't know how to say hello. What do you have in common? But once you get past that initial thing, a glass of wine helps. You can definitely connect, and you realize, like, you know what, we're all human, and we all have the same like goals and interests and needs and so on. And bridging that cultural gap, I think, is such a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
You're right about like the whole bit about like what you can gain from abroad. I mean, it's a lived experience, and what you can gain by actually immersing yourself in another culture is far beyond. I mean, so I've always really liked this quote from Muhammad, as in like the prophet who's founded Islam. I really always been a fan of this quote that, don't tell me how educated you are, tell me how much you've traveled. But as we're in the context of schools, I never want to like ever suggest that a formal education is not important. So what I tend to say to my clients is that education teaches you how to think, but travel teaches you how to understand. Mm-hmm. And I really mean that on like all levels, like kind of this like empathy, this like cultural understanding, giving context to like facts and knowledge and history. Like I grew up, for example, in the New York City area, and I learned history from that perspective. Mm-hmm. And then I go to other countries and I see, like, when you go to museums and how their take on a certain war or whatever happens, like, mm-hmm. Whoa, we didn't learn about that way. So it's really eye-opening. Seriously.
Indeed, I would absolutely agree with that. And I think that it's generational. I'm seeing more and more prospective candidates as I'm on the road recruiting that want that element of diversity in a lived experience. And so it wasn't, there were some barriers when I was in university, financing being one of them. And so I think that many people think that it's not possible to go on exchange or to travel because of the expense of it. But I would argue that today there are many scholarships, many opportunities to partake in an exchange that will fit your goals. And I think it's possible for anybody to go on exchange if they really want to. There's lots of great resources out there to be able to make it happen.
You bring up an interesting aspect, the expense of it, and I'll tie in with that the kind of like admin element. Mm-hmm. Like that could be like complicated or paperwork heavy, and along with the cost. And I was doing a little bit of research about exchange programs in Canada, talking to some colleagues in the industry, and it seems like that most Canadian schools do offer some kind of opportunity with going abroad, and very few people, especially in Anglophone Canada, the English-speaking portion of Canada, very few relative to total population actually take this opportunity, mm-hmm. which is quite a shame, because the schools tend to have either a department or some office that handles this, right, and gives you all the tools and information that you need to do it, making it logistically as easy as possible.
Absolutely.
And there's and it's often financially realistic as well for most people. The statistics are something like less than 1% of Canadians in the English-speaking part of Canada mm-hmm. go for these exchanges, which is really a shame. So I implore anyone who's listening today in the Canadian, in Canada, to take that opportunity, because really the services are there. Mm-hmm. And personally, another thing that I really regret is not actually going abroad myself during college. Mm-hmm. Because obviously, so I'm American, I live in France, I've lived in a few countries like Spain and Australia, and it's been fantastic. But I started that real international life at 30. So obviously you can do it anytime, but I don't think you'll ever do it so cheaply and so kind of carefree as when you're in college. Which makes me think of, I don't know if you know the movie L'Auberge Espagnole. It's the Spanish hostel, I guess it would translate to, and it's like an icon. Like, Europeans know and love this movie. It's like a kind of cultural reference and a sort of very nostalgic film where people come from, young people coming from all different countries, and they like end up like living together in a campus mm-hmm. dorm situation and all that ensues. And yeah, it's a really beautiful, rich experience, like living abroad and getting to know people from different.
Yeah, and I think there's some reluctancy too, not just in cost, but the older you get, the more reluctant you are to make new connections outside of just in a professional capacity. And I think that when you travel and you become more comfortable meeting new people, those insecurities fall away. And I can tell you from my own experience, similar to Eric, not really traveling extensively until I started in this job. I've been to over 50 countries now, and the amount of experiences and people that I have met is not just fabulous, but I can say I have friends all over the world now. And maybe I don't talk to them every day, but those connections are for life. And those experiences are definitely how I've been shaped as a professional and in my personal life as well. So I would say that, and echo Eric's words, that if you have the opportunity to go abroad, take advantage of it.
Yeah, it's true. As we get older, naturally, there's more things kind of holding us back. You might have, children or a spouse or expenses, like a mortgage, or perhaps elderly parents to take care of. And, life tends to get a little bit more complicated. So I really encourage anyone, if you're young, like to start now and get a taste of it. And you find a way to make it work as you're older. Whereas if you start traveling much later in life, it's harder. It's harder to go for it, to have that really a broad experience. So I wanted to look at specifically some of the dual programs and exchanges that exist with Queen's, with Smith, either way you want to take it. Yeah. Specifically with any French schools, or if you want to share even outside of France. But obviously today the focus is France, right? Connections to Canada and France. So I'll let you take it away and talk about it.
Sure, absolutely. And I'll touch on what you said earlier around the percentage of students, prospective candidates in post-secondary education going abroad. At Smith, at the Queen's University in the Commerce program, for example, 80% of our commerce students go on an exchange. So that's massive. And it just speaks to sort of that global perspective that we foster and that we want to continue to see. And in part, I think that our partnerships, our extensive list of partners, help students to make this decision easier, as well as the Center for International Management. To your point around finding resources and assistance to help, I think that having a center to help students, to guide them, to walk them through the entire process also makes it much easier for a student to envision themselves going abroad, because they have the support necessary to see it to come to fruition. As well, I would recommend that candidates that really don't know where to start, that they start at the university international centers, because at the very least, all universities have international centers. And this is going to be a great first step if you don't have, like us, a Center for International Management that can really walk you through exchange programs. At the very least, the international centers can guide you in the right direction and provide some information about some partnerships. So I think that that's the first step in finding a great exchange opportunity for yourselves. With our School of Business, we have some great options. We have 14 partners in France alone. So that's one of the largest countries in terms of a number of partners. Within the MBA, we partner with Emilon, and I probably butchered that, Emilion, and ESSEC. And then within our commerce programs, we have very robust partnerships at lots of different schools. Happy to name them, but you can go onto our website to see the extensive list. And then with our Masters of International Business, again, a really unique program that gives you the ability to not only do an exchange, but also a double degree. So for example, at ESSEC, we have a double degree option where you can spend up to 6 months, do a global project, and gain that fully immersive experience in France. So lots of great options to be able to go and not just do global projects, but also do the exchange as well as the double degrees. I would say that these... Yeah, sure.
I want to contextualize the audience. So if you guys don't know ESSEC Business School or EM Lyon, that's in English, it'd be EM Lyon. These are two of the best business schools in France. So that's really says something about the reputation of Queen's, by the way, the caliber of program. Schools generally partner together for exchange when they're kind of at the same level. So Queen's and ESSEC, as well as EM Lyon, are both like top level business schools that provide equivalent service, have equivalent reputations, and great global networks of alumni around the world. Sorry.
Thank you for that, Eric. I think it's really important to speak about sort of the quality of the education and not knowing the audience. I think it's important, and please feel free to ask questions around other partnerships. But I think that this is key. And another point is that you can go as short as 2 weeks, depending on the type of program you're looking for, or like I said, up to 6 months. In the MBA program, for example, we have an exchange up to 4 months. And one of the reasons that a student might choose in the MBA to go abroad is a luxury brand course that we don't offer. So that might be one of the motivating factors to do an exchange, as an example. So there are some really interesting courses when you think about education outside of your home country, so outside of Canada, that we just don't offer at Queen's, that ESSEC, for example, does offer, or one of the other partners. Another reason is, of course, to gain that global exposure. So this is the time to do it, because you probably won't have another time in your life outside of post-secondary education to really think about taking 6 months to just go abroad if you're working, in a professional career, or like Eric said, other family. Other family things that are keeping you sort of tied down. Not to, everyone is different, and I'm just generalizing here. So I know everyone's going to have different experiences, but the reality is that it becomes much more difficult outside of your graduate studies or post-secondary studies to go abroad for a period of time. So, and just finally, we have 14 partners within schools in France, but we have more than 115, we like to say, carefully selected business schools in more than 38 countries around the world that we partner with at the School of Business alone. So it is quite robust in terms of the exchange and double degrees that we offer in our commerce program, in our master's programs, and then, of course, in our MBA options.
Fantastic. Wow. A lot of good information. Actually, you made me think of something, and maybe just to tease apart this idea. You mentioned you can go as short as 2 weeks. What can a student expect from an exchange that's just 2 weeks versus something that's 6 months?
Yeah, good question. So for example, if a student just wants to take half a credit, that would be the short exchange, the 2 week option, as opposed to doing an entire semester. So depending on the credits that they're looking to obtain, that really determines the length of time that a student would be away for. So if you really are keen to take, 2 or 3 courses abroad, that will extend your time, upwards of 6 months, as opposed to just taking half a credit. That would be, the shorter exchange, 2 weeks up to a month for the shorter exchanges. So there's flexibility in all of this. So if you just want to sort of dip your foot in and you want to get an experience, but you're not committed to a long stretch of time, then just do the 2 week or 1 month exchange, or with the double degree, if you're looking more towards a double degree, of course, that's going to be a longer period of time. So it's around your motivation and what your interests and goals are ultimately.
Yes, of course. I think a lot of times candidates or people who are students in a university get confused about, if they do this kind of experience abroad, will they have a degree from that school or not? So what's important for a student to know and to look out for to make sure that they get what they're looking for?
I think it's about the gaps in the education that you're currently in. So if you're finding that, as I said earlier, about the luxury brand course that we don't offer, if you know you want to go into that space, retail is important to you, maybe you want to work in consulting and you think that it's important to have a global perspective in that specific industry, then it makes a lot of sense to go on an exchange. But at the same point in time, if you're really keen to get a separate degree from a different institution, then the double degree option is going to be the best option there. So exchanges will not give you a separate degree. Unfortunately, you do have to do the double degree options in order to be able to get the 2 brands in terms of a degree. But again, it comes down to motivation and interest and goals. many of our MBA students, for example, will choose to go abroad because there's a course we simply just don't offer. So we recently partnered with LBS, London Business School, and there were some specific fintech courses that we didn't offer at Smith. And so this is a great motivation for why somebody might choose to go to London to pursue those courses, as an example. So it really is very individual preferences and gaps within knowledge that would motivate someone to choose a particular school and course.
So it's important that students know that if they do want to be able to say and put on their resume or their CV that they have a degree from both schools, that it says double degree.
That's correct.
Yeah. So here's a question: like, if somebody comes, say, from a French school to Queen's for an exchange, are they considered part of the alumni network of Queen's, or that would only be the case if they did the double degree?
Only the case if they would do a double degree, but that's not to say they don't have access to that network. So they're not considered an alumni if they've just done an exchange. But as part of their exchange, they're building out their peer groups, their network, and oftentimes, we'll be able to connect with those exchange students depending on our own travel. So meaning in my role as associate director, I'm often traveling not just for the MBA program, but our Masters of Business program, wherein I'll meet some of our exchange students and have really interesting conversations and being able to connect with them because they feel a connection to Queen's University. So that's always such a wonderful feeling. I can briefly take a moment to speak about an anecdote. I was traveling for personal reasons to Portugal, and I was in the Algarve, and I had posted some photos on my Instagram, and one of our exchange students that was actually from France was there for a weekend. As you know, it's not far to travel from France, from Paris to Lisboa. And so he and I met up just based on knowing that I was in Portugal at the time. So, we build those connections and relationships because our cohorts are relatively small, and we really, I would say, foster a collaboration. And once you're part of the Queen's family, you're part of that family for life, whether you're an exchange student or not. So whether you're part of the alumni network doesn't really mean you can't get involved, you can't build those relationships and stay connected.
It is true. It is kind of a lifetime thing. And I think that works both ways, by the way. If somebody's coming from Canada to do a double degree in a French school, they would have that lifetime membership to the alumni network and be able to depend on often alumni services, which could include career advice or help with working on your resume, that kind of thing, well beyond your graduation. So it is important to be aware of that distinction between double degree and an exchange. So let's talk about some experiences. Could you share, I don't know, I mean, since you're so connected, I know, Teresa, I know you are very connected with your students from when you've met them before they started the program, kind of like seeing them along throughout the program and, developing a professional, but also friendship with them as they've graduated, Yeah. So what do your students say to you? Could you share some experiences they've had?
Absolutely. And I can actually speak directly. I asked some of our students about this, knowing that I was preparing for this conversation. And I did get a couple of quotes, if I can read them. This is real quotes from students that gave me sort of insights into their exchange. One said that the Asian MBA exchange opportunity at the National University of Singapore provided me with an incredible opportunity to gain international perspective on business. Another one that went to ESSEC, it gave me the opportunity to create an international network of MBA candidates from all over the world. So this was the luxury brand program I was speaking about. And so many people will come to ESSEC specifically for that exchange opportunity. And so she was speaking about the international network. And so these two perspectives, they're, doesn't matter where you go in the world, you're going to gain a different lens to how business is done, not just from your peers in the class, but also from the faculty, from living that experience, from being in that country. You're going to gain insights that you wouldn't otherwise be able to gain if you were just in your home country. And so I think that this is just two short quotes that really speak to the value of doing an international exchange.
Absolutely. So let's not forget, and thank you for sharing those, Teresa. I really appreciate that. So let's not forget that when we go to do a degree, whether it's a regular degree or a double degree or exchange, it's always about getting a job afterwards, right? We're not investing all this time and money for no reason. So let's think about, let's examine what employers might have to say about such experiences or programs. What is the value that they see in them?
Oftentimes we're hearing from employers, regardless of what industry, I would say it sort of spans across all of them, whether it's consulting or finance or, supply chain, whatever it might be. What we're often hearing is that personal development can really be seen in their professional maturity. And so when you have an opportunity to travel, you become more independent. Not to say you're not independent now, but it gives you a different perspective to being independent, because when you're in a different country and that country speaks a different language, maybe you don't have, that skill isn't yet built, you learn as you go. But I would say that in doing so, in being in an uncomfortable environment, maybe for a period of time, really develops your understanding of how to be gritty, I like to say, or resilient. And those are really fundamental skills to being successful in business. And so we often hear that sort of that personal and professional development comes through with the experiences that they share in the interview, and how they carry themselves, especially from the cultural intelligence perspective of things. Because once you have, gained that diverse experience, you manage challenges better, because the reality is that business is done very globally today. And if you don't understand the cultural differences and nuances to working with people from different countries, then it's going to be very difficult for you to succeed. So oftentimes we're hearing from employers that is a key piece to being successful in business today, is having that global perspective, that diversity of experience.
Totally agree. There's IQ. Okay, there's emotional intelligence, but I like the term you used of cultural intelligence. And that's absolutely that not only companies are looking for, but actually like high level degrees such as an MBA. Usually they want people with already a certain level of intercultural international exposure, because that means often that they will have the capacity to work better with people from other cultures efficiently. And I think you gain a sense of empathy. It's pretty difficult to kind of hate on another group that you actually have had experience with. You get to know, like I said earlier, that we're all just people, and even though on the external they might appear different, like really we're all the same inside. And so you gain a sort of empathy to be able to work with and have patience for, and in the case of a degree or work, to produce results if you have projects that you have to work on together. My experience from some people who have come into the MBA at ESSEC, seeing them all come in with a certain level already of international exposure, but then like the pressure cooker situation of having to deliver on a project with like this much time and everyone's from a different country, and what's black to me is white to you, and so forth. It's like, wow. But you learn how to turn that on, and it's something that's very attractive for employers. So I would have to say that doing a dual degree, or at least an exchange, is something that is a huge added value to your resume in terms of getting hired. I'm also seeing a note in the background that we have a question coming in from Anna. I can see it actually. So Julian, I'll go ahead and read it. It says, and I guess I'll put it to you, Teresa. Do all Canadian universities have strong ties with countries abroad for exchanges in many countries?
I can't speak to all Canadian universities. I think that Canada alone is very diverse in culture. So I would say that, Canadian universities like the University of Toronto, for example, McGill University, they will definitely have very, very strong ties with exchange partners. Like I said earlier, we have 115 partners in 38 countries. So that is very, very robust. And so I would say that maybe it's not, that list isn't the same everywhere, but I would say that from what I have seen and heard, there are very strong ties with Canadian universities with international partners.
Sure. What about some of the drawbacks? Like, we've been talking all this positive stuff, let's be honest, there's always two sides to every coin. So what comes to mind? I mean, for me, I thought of like, okay, FOMO, like fear of missing out, right? So if you're, let's say normally you'd be 4 years at Queen's, and then you took a semester or a year somewhere like, say, France, I'm going to miss out on that year with my friends and, whatever they're doing that year that I'm away. So that's like a thing. You can't obviously be everywhere at the same time.
Absolutely.
With social media, you can keep in touch a lot and sort of be like up to date, and they'll be jealous of the stuff you're doing over in France, obviously, because it's awesome here.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that you're absolutely right. There's always going to be, people like myself when I was in university and thinking about, what I'd be missing out on. And so it was never even in my purview to think about going abroad. And particularly in my experience, because I had a very international experience at home, first generation immigrant. So my background is Portuguese. And so I'd always traveled in my life to see my family in Portugal and Switzerland, etc. So Europe was not unfamiliar to me. But that's not an excuse not to travel and go on exchange, because you do have the opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise get, like an enhanced network, building skills by that sort of cultural intelligence piece that I mentioned, and gain international perspectives that you wouldn't get otherwise. So there are some definite benefits, but I can see why, somebody wouldn't want to go based on, to Eric's point, you don't want to miss it on what's happening at home. Most importantly, I think that it depends where you're at in your stage. Let's say, for example, if you're at the end of university, or for example, in an MBA program, in a master's program that might be short, you might be hindering your opportunities to secure employment, for example, if that's on-campus recruiting is happening while you're away. So that might be a real reason why you might think about looking at a different time to go, or thinking maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense to go abroad. Today, due to the pandemic, there are virtual options, so you can take courses abroad now virtually. So that could be an opportunity to still gain that network and perspective. It won't be the same lived experience, but there's alternatives, right? And I think that you have to think about what's right for you at this time. So what makes the most sense to where your goals are. So it has to there has to be that alignment. If you're still early on in your university and you're thinking, well, I'm not looking for a job at this time, I'm in my second or third year, I still have flexibility, then absolutely take advantage of going abroad. That's just my opinion. But you do have to think about what you're missing out on, and it shouldn't be in my opinion, it shouldn't be friends related, because your friends, like Eric said, can follow you on social media, and you're going to be doing some really cool and amazing things in whatever country. And let me tell you, Paris is one of the best places to be. So I don't think that's a legitimate reason to not go abroad.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You talked about like employment opportunities. If your exchange is going to coincide with that, that could be a real hindrance to you getting a job. Definitely something important to think about, especially if you're an international student coming from whichever country to, say, Queens, for example, and during your, say, MBA at Queens, you did an exchange. That's tight, because you, as an international student, you really have to consider, hang on, like I already am, going against the grain in terms of like I have to get a visa, and I'm from a different culture. It's already hard, so that might be. But yeah, for your undergrad years, where you have usually 4 years, maybe 5 that you're going to be there, you're younger, definitely is the ideal time, I think, to do.
Yeah, and I think that, when candidates are thinking about going abroad, yes, there's all those factors like the study permits, the visas,
right?
Having some extra cash just to, have some money for lived experience while you're in that home country. But again, check out the resources that your university offers you, because there are support systems in place for you to be able to go abroad and not stress and worry about those things, because that shouldn't be a reason why you don't go on exchange.
When you mentioned money, I'll just ask you about how it works at Queens in terms of that. Like, if I understand correctly, you're paying tuition at Queens.
Correct.
And your experience at that other college is taken into account with the tuition you're already paying at Queens. You're not paying.
Correct. That's exactly right. So the only additional expenses are your travel expenses and your housing. And typically what would be offered would be on-campus accommodation for those going on exchange. And so, of course, you could live off campus, but it's always going to be cheaper to live on campus.
Usually it is, absolutely,
yeah. And so
you have to pay for food and housing anyway, wherever
yes,
you are.
exactly. That's correct.
The real thing is your flight.
Yes.
You have to think about health insurance, something, but that's, for example, in France, students studying abroad, you're going to pay annually about 220 euros, which is, for Canadian dollars, a little bit higher. It's like something like 400 Canadian. Is that right, Teresa?
About $400, $500. Yes.
Yeah, it's double.
About that.
Yeah. And I don't know how that stacks up for what you pay in Canada anyway, but France and Canada have, I think, pretty similar healthcare systems where you pay, taxes to the state system, and you have fantastic coverage. You have top quality healthcare, so you'll always be fine. And I mean, 220 euros for a year is reasonable considering
Absolutely. That is very, very reasonable. And so this is again where all of those questions, if you go to our University International Center, and even if you're not at Queen's, I would recommend going to the it's quick quic.ca, and they have a frequently asked questions tab where anyone can access, and types of questions like this can be answered for you, and anyone can have access to this. So if you find those resources, make sure that you're going through the frequently asked questions, because I have no doubt that someone else has already asked the question that you're curious about.
Sure. And then there's the visa bit. Pretty straightforward, right? Do you have support at Queen's for people if they need to get the visa? Yeah.
Yes, we do. Yes. So the Quick Center, the Queen's University International Center, provides details. They actually have certified, trained advisors specifically for students looking to acquire study permits and visas to be able to go on exchange. So we work very closely with our Center for International Management and the Quick office to ensure that students are well supported with regards to that.
Sure. So if you're a Canadian citizen, that's pretty easy. If you're different citizenship other than Canadian at Queen's, looking to study abroad in France or another country, there's a potential that there could be another layer of difficulty, but I'm sure you'll be there to, not you personally, but the center be there.
Indeed. No, you're absolutely right. Yes, again, this is where it comes down to, depending on where you're from, what needs to happen. Every situation, every person's going to have a different situation. You're right. If you're in Canada studying and your citizenship is not Canadian, then the path is going to look a little different. But again, those support and resources are there for students, and I suspect at every university that offers exchanges. So don't be concerned about that. You will find the right resources to ensure that you can make this happen. It's really just about, how long do you want to go? Where do you want to go? Why are you going there? What is the motivation for that particular institution? As oftentimes you'll have to write some sort of essay or, description as to what it is about your personal motivation for that institution. And that's how the selection process is made. Typically you choose, 1, 2, or 3 schools, and most often our students get their first choice. But again, it has to be a true exchange. So if you want to go to ESSEC, for example, they also have to be sending exchange students. So that's often the case with exchange. Double degrees work a little differently. You do have to apply, of course. So there is some crossover with the application, but you do need to think about what that application process looks depending on the school that you're applying to. Again, seeking out the resources and support to make sure that you're applying and putting your best foot forward to get that double degree option.
You're absolutely right that with the exchanges is often limited number of places, because since there's no monetary exchange, it's about exchanging bodies essentially. So
exactly.
For example, between Queen's and ESSEC, maybe we have a deal. Okay, there's like 10 and 10 that swap each year, but in the given year, if there's only 8 coming from Queen's, then ESSEC may only be able to offer a reduced in the following year. So it has to balance out in the end, and that's why you might be told no to your first choice, but most of the time you will get your first choice.
Exactly, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, let's throw a last minute monkey wrench into the whole thing. COVID, right? So COVID has definitely put a hamper on, everything in the world, least of all exchange programs, because you're crossing international borders. So maybe you could just talk a little about what you've seen since COVID arrived. And I think, exchange programs have often made a recovery, and I think a lot of schools are trying to push that again. So tell me what's going on in Queen's.
Yeah, everything has completely shifted and changed. We, over the last 18 months prior to September, have only offered virtual exchanges, even though some countries were open to accept students, we weren't open to receiving them. And so that was where the challenge lies, because every country has different immigration rules and policies, especially when it comes to COVID.
It's like a moving target too.
Yeah, absolutely. And things were changing so rapidly that there was just a lot of uncertainty there. And so I'm happy to report now that we have received exchange students, and we have students out on exchange currently. So things from that standpoint are feeling as normal as they can, but of course you do have to be vaccinated and you do have to meet the protocols of that country. And so what it might mean is that you have your vaccination printed out and you carry it with you everywhere, or you have a supplementary letter in entering Canada, for example, that will be required as proof of X, Y, and Z, depending on what the school is requiring. For us at Queen's, you are required to be vaccinated, and so you do have to show proof of vaccination before entering the country and before coming onto campus. And so that is just mandated across Ontario, and I believe it is also across Canada at this time. And so there are some nuances that weren't there previously, but in terms of, lining up all of your documents, this is just one other thing that you have to make sure you have in order to have no bumps in the road, if you will, before starting your exchange opportunity.
Fantastic. And I think I have one more question for you before we wrap up today.
Sure.
We are kind of getting to the end of the hour. What about some advice in terms of choosing? Like, there's so many options out there. You mentioned, I think, at least 14 partnerships. Like, how
just in France alone.
Oh, in France alone, there's 14. Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
In France alone, there's 14. We have 115 partners across the globe. And so it really depends on many things. I think location, city. Do you want to be in a large program, small program? My advice is to do a pro and con list. I love my lists. So figure out, where are your gaps and look at the program you're currently in and see where you're maybe not getting some of your interest filled through the courses. I've recently taken a marketing course as well as an organizational behavior course and absolutely loved them. And they were not part of my undergrad experience. So it's important to think about what it is that you want to get out of your university experience. And then think about, does an exchange fill that gap? Where does it make sense to go? Maybe you speak another language and you want to go to a country that has that language. So there's lots of different reasons why somebody will go, but ultimately it has to be a motivating factor for you to want to be there. And you want to enjoy your experience. So choose a fun city. That's just my advice. But you want to go to a place where, you're really going to have the best lived experience that you possibly can. And there's so many places in France to go to have that amazing experience. And so I think that, location, city, size should all factor into your decision making.
So Teresa loves her lists. I like my my spreadsheets. So it's similar, but I like to make my columns and I list all the different kind of criteria. So you mentioned a couple of things already. So we're not really factoring cost for exchange because that's not
right.
Really, but what kind of place is it? Is it a big city, medium, small
exactly.
place? Is it is the campus, the program or the campus? What's the population? You want a big program, small? Is diversity important to you? Do you really want to be surrounded by a high percentage of people from other countries around the world? Percentage female? Does the program tend to be more collaborative or competitive? There's a lot of things you can think about that can help you determine, what you're looking for. So that's why I like a spreadsheet that you can sort of check off all the different little boxes and see, what's not lacking, but what would enhance your experience in education overall and what that other program could give you. So
absolutely, that's a great piece of advice. And the other thing that you want to consider is that this is, you can't go back and change it. So you want to make the most out of it. So make sure that you're getting the most out of your experience wherever you go. And I want to wish you all the best. Good luck. And thank you so much, Eric, for your time today.
Thank you, Teresa. And I see Franck is back. Hi.
That was a terrific presentation. Thank you very much, Teresa, Eric. Thank you very much for your time again and all those information. I'm very sure that if there were among the audience anyone who were wondering whether or not that was a good idea to consider that, I'm pretty sure that for 100% now their decision is made up, and most likely they would consider going to any of those 14 programs that you have in common with different schools in France. Again, thank you very much for your time. I will not hold you too long, guys. You are busy as well for the rest of the day. I would like to take the opportunity with this ending of the last conference to thank all the people who attend the presentations throughout those 2 days. Of course, Eric, been moderator for a lot of them. I just want to finish again to tell you that, as you know, all the conferences will be available in on our YouTube channel. So feel free to click and watch them again by the end of this week. Without any further ado, we say that I wish you a good end of the day. Thank you very much, and we see you soon in time. Thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.